Well, we'll need a legal eagle for this one. With us, he's practiced both in the U.S. and here in France. Former prosecutor Stephen Dreyfuss is the ex-president of the International Association of Lawyers. Thank you for speaking with us from New York City.
Hi, nice to be with you.
What is it with presidents taking or vice presidents taking classified documents when they leave office?
Well, I think there's a certain quality of Greek tragedy about all this because you recall that Joe Biden in September in an interview said about Trump, how could that possibly happen? How could anyone be that irresponsible? And just now, at the moment where Biden is taking a victory lap because he's reveling in the contrast between his infrastructure bill that's going to put a lot of people to work around the country and the disorganization of the Republicans who couldn't even elect a speaker, even though they had the majority, just at that point, this comes out. But what's bizarre about it is I think that everyone would agree that politics 101 is that when you have some bad information, get it all out quickly and all at once.
But there are published reports that he knew about this before the midterm elections.
Well, one thing is clear. I mean, we have a chronology that shows that the first batch of documents, about 10 of them, was found on November 2nd, which indeed is 6 days before the November 8th midterms, and that on November 4th, 4 days before the midterm, the National Archives contacted the Justice Department to say that the White House had disclosed the existence of these documents. So it's clear that the White House knew, but more importantly, the Justice Department knew. But according to the chronology that at least has been reconstructed in the American press this morning, the FBI did not even begin to assess whether any laws were broken, according to Attorney General Garland, until November 9th, which just happened to be the day after the midterms. It's not well handled. And the fact also that they didn't disclose it themselves. They waited for the news media to disclose it on January 9th. And then, even then, when the news media disclosed it on January 9th, they only talked about the first batch of documents. And even though the president and the White House knew very well that there was a second batch of documents, they only talked about the first batch. They could have, what we say in the law, drawn the teeth of the bad evidence and brought it out themselves and looked forthcoming and voluntary and honest. And yet they seem to have let it drag out and drag out.
Why? Why is that?
Well, it may be because lawyers were running the show about this rather than the political people in the White House. And lawyers tend to be prudent and tend to feel like we want to see everything before we decide to disclose anything. That is actually good advice for a lawyer in defending a case, not great advice in the political context. So that's the conundrum here. Now, as your correspondent pointed out, there are indeed lots of factual differences between what happened here and what happened with President Trump, for all the reasons that were explained. Biden has been very forthcoming. The White House has notified the archives, and the Justice Department was notified quickly. They haven't resisted the way Trump did. They haven't dissembled. They haven't said they've searched and they have produced everything, and then it's discovered that there's more stuff. They haven't claimed that this was theirs. And there's also the big difference that Biden is the sitting president. So right now, his possession of classified documents is perfectly all right. The problem is that these documents appear to be from his term as vice president. And for the 4 years between the time he was vice president and the time that he took office as president, he was not entitled to have them. So we don't really know. The problem is that at least the initial reports indicated that though these documents were fewer in number, there may have been very highly classified documents, what are called top secret, sensitive, compartmentalized information, which is the highest classification and which is only allowed to be examined even by people who have the right to look at it in a facility that has special protection against penetration and cyber attack and everything else.
So let me ask you about this, because you say highly classified documents. All classified documents are not the same. And we discovered when there was, back when there were the big WikiLeaks data dumps, one of the big criticisms leveled against the bureaucracy of the US federal government is that they stamp classified on things that shouldn't be classified. So, point of fact, how classified are these classified documents? That's what we're wondering.
Well, we don't know yet, but the initial reports about the 10 or 12 documents that were initially disclosed as having been found in a closet of a Biden office that he used as vice president, which was being vacated and cleaned out. The initial reports indicated that at least some of them were top secret / SCI, which is the highest level of classification. And top secret is generally defined to be, quote, documents that reasonably could be expected to cause exceptionally grave damage to the national security. That being said, as of October 2017, nearly 1.2 million people in the United States had top secret clearance. So though it is a very high level,
1.2 million.
That's the number that was disclosed at the time of the Trump investigation. So and I don't have a source for it, but I have seen it reported. Assuming that's the case, that doesn't change anything, because the level of top secret information is crucial, because it's defined as potentially causing exceptionally grave damage to the national security.
So let me ask you this question then, Stephen Dreyfuss. Would something like this be possible here in France? I mean, we've had presidents leave office who still had political ambition. Valéry Giscard d'Estaing springs to mind, but of course, Emmanuel Macron's still going to be a young man when he leaves office. Would this be possible in France? You always want to keep folders on your potential opponents.
Well, yes. I mean, there certainly is what's called opposition research in this country, and I'm sure the same thing happens there. What I don't know, and perhaps you do, what the French legislation says about the prerogatives of a president. I know that the president gets a paid office and he gets a salary after he leaves office, and he gets lots of prerogatives. Whether that includes continuing to have access to this kind of information, I frankly don't know the answer, but it will be a fascinating inquiry when our French colleagues do look at it, or your French colleagues, particularly the journalists. I would expect something from Mediapart fairly soon.
Mediapart, the investigative news website. Let me ask you, does this mean Donald Trump is off the hook when it comes to the January 6th storming of the Capitol?
Well, that's where the special counsel come in. And they are not special prosecutors, they're special counsel. And the difference is that they, by themselves, do not have the right to decide to bring a prosecution. They make a report to the Attorney General, who is the one, based on that report, who decides whether to bring the prosecution, in which case the special counsel and his staff will do it. So Merrick Garland has been careful, the Attorney General has been careful to appoint, for this matter, a very experienced prosecutor, Robert Hur, who was a Trump appointee as the chief federal prosecutor in Maryland, and also worked as the principal assistant to the deputy attorney general in the Trump administration, Mr. Rosenstein, who was supervising on behalf of Bill Barr, the Trump attorney general, the activities of Robert Mueller when he was doing his special counsel investigation. So they've been careful to appoint someone who no one could credibly accuse of being pro-Democrat. That doesn't mean that he isn't going to be accused of that. I'm sure he will be, but it's a tough sell. So they do have a chance to come out of this with an independent point of view. Now, the Justice Department has a long-term policy longstanding policy that we heard about during the Trump administration, that they will not indict a sitting president for a crime. Their position is that as to sitting presidents, the only remedy should be impeachment. But they can certainly make a report which will indicate their view of whether or not what he did constitutes a crime. And the big issue here will be the question of intent. Did he know? Did the president know that this was being done? Did he intend that these documents be maintained? Or was it simply an error by people below him of which he was unaware? The question is the same with regard to the other independent investigation being done of Donald Trump with regard to the Mar-a-Lago documents, where there is substantial evidence that at various points in the process, not only did Donald Trump know about it, but he took an active role in opposing the efforts of the government to get the documents back.
Get the documents back. We're running very short on time, so just in one sentence, is this a particularly difficult test that the U.S. institutions and the credibility of their credibility face, or is this just par for the course these days?
Well, I think it's par for the course, and the fact that we have the special counsel set up gives an impression and a feeling to the people that at least it's being done in a straightforward way, rather than having the Department of Justice do it itself. It's called out somebody independent to do it, and then we'll see where it goes.
We'll see where it goes indeed. Stephen Dreyfuss, many thanks for speaking with us from New York City.
My pleasure. Thank you.